not get the notification that this is being recorded, but it looks like it's being recorded. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours with Cloud Posse, your weekly dose of insider DevOps trends, AWS news, and Terraform insights, all sourced from our sweetops community, plus a live Q&A you can't find anywhere else. It's January 22nd, 2025. I'm your host, Eric Osterman. Real quick, I'm the founder and CEO of Cloud Posse. We are a DevOps accelerator for AWS infrastructure that helps teams deploy their software faster. We do this by using our over 200 Terraform modules that have been battle tested and downloaded over 100 million times. So if you or your team has been banging your head with against the wall with Terraform, just head over to cloudposse.com/meet, answer a few quick questions, and we'll show you what it can look like. So how do you maximize today's session? First off, our format is very informal. You can engage as much as you like and ask questions. And if you're curious about any of our open source tools or modules, go for it. For those on the recording, we host these calls live. Join us by going to cloudposse.com/officehours. Now, I do have one ask. If you find any portion of today's session valuable, share it with your team. Just go to youtube.com/cloudposse where you'll find this recording. Okay, so let's get started with the news. 1 second here. Oop. All right, pretty light on announcements. So if there's anything that caught your attention, do share. So Jeremy Grodberg on our team's been working on releasing the next version of Geodesic. We have a pre-release RC5, so it's gone through quite a lot of rigorous testing with various customers and projects, so it's looking pretty good. So there's a few notable updates in this release. It's improving the ability of working. Well, okay, let me take a step back. If you're not familiar with Geodesic is a DevOps Linux toolbox in a container, in a Docker image. If you're familiar with using dev containers, it's a very similar concept to dev containers, only that it's been around for much longer than dev containers. And it is designed to be a standalone shell that you can run with whether you're in your IDE or not. So with the Geodesic shell, you can package all of your tools that you depend on to manage like your infrastructure or some piece of it in a container. And then everyone can use that container to run those tools as an interactive shell. Because it's an interactive shell and it's all running on Linux, you have a consistent standardized environment that ensures that everyone can get up and running real quickly. We typically always deliver our projects with a Geodesic shell as part of it. It's not a requirement, but it does reduce the initial effort to get up and running with any environment. So going back to this announcement then, if I can go back here. Some of the notable features, well, let me also pull up my notes here. So one of the things that we learned with this Docker image and our approach was mounting the whole home directory into the container was not a good strategy for multiple reasons. First and foremost, when you bind mount that volume to the container and in the container your root, well, now suddenly, depending on your operating system, some of your files that were touched or modified from within the container now in your host OS became also owned by root, and that was not ideal. The other issue is performance. Depending on the version of, well, I guess the runtime of or container engine you're using, performance could be severely impacted. It's improved over the years, but it was still problematic for many. Mounting the whole home folder with all of its files into the container was slow. So, and then if you don't have your development files in your home directory, you couldn't use it as effectively. So we now support the full configuration on the mount points, I believe, that go into Geodesic. We also had problems where Geodesic always would try to re-enter another running container if that was available. There's now a flag -- solo that you can pass that will just join, that will just start always a new container. There's some other configuration options that can be set in a launch options setting as well. So if you've been using Geodesic, check it out. We would love to have some of your feedback before we cut the final release. And if you hadn't heard about Geodesic, check it out and see if it helps your DevOps tool chain at your company. But yeah, very thorough release notes are going out as part of this. Any questions before I move on? Next one that caught my attention was JReleaser. What's this? JReleaser is like GoReleaser, only they're positioning it as a tool that can actually release multiple projects, not just like Java. Based on the name and the icon, I guess that's where it got its start. I'm sure if you're a Java developer, you maybe heard of it. This was the first I had heard of it. It was trending on Hacker News, I believe today, and it looked interesting. GoReleaser's been awesome for us for our projects that are Go based, but if this works for everything, that's also interesting. Anyone use JReleaser? Third exciting announcement is if you're using GitHub issues, you can now link lots of issues together as related. Specifically, you can have a parent task with a bunch of sub-issues. Now, I'm not sure if you have to opt into it. It used to be opt-in. I noticed today when I went to like one of our repos, like Atmos, went to issues, and you can look at any one of these issues, and at the bottom here, you can click the button to create a sub-issue. You can add existing issues as related to this as well. So it's pretty nice. And the other somewhat related announcement, which I don't know why I couldn't use or test. But you should be able to now, oops, I opened the wrong link here. You should be able to now ask Copilot why your job failed. So if you look at the checks, click on the ellipses and click explain error, it should tell you now, hopefully in a succinct manner, why your test is failing. I tried to use it, but I didn't have the access to the ellipses, and I pay for Copilot, so I don't know why. If that's an organizational setting, I maybe need to implement or something.
Do we actually have Copilot enabled like on the enterprise, like for all the users? Because I think that's like the requirement.
Well, but a Copilot is something you buy licenses for on a seat by seat basis. So I do have a seat that I'm using, so I should be able to see it at a minimum. But maybe there's a setting on the features that Copilot has access to. And just scanning this, I didn't see it immediately that was true, but
Wait, what does that say for Copilot subscriptions page? I thought that there was like a level of Copilot. Keep going down a little bit. Right there.
yeah, yeah.
I think you have to have like one of the higher level, not just like
Mhm.
the opt-in, like you need, I think either the business or the enterprise one for it to do this thing.
I don't know. I have an open source contributor seat, and I can see the explain error
Oh, you see it?
bubble. Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, and I did see that it would be available for that tier as a contributor seat. Oh, Jeremy, I didn't realize you were on the call. I had brought up the Geodesic announcement earlier. I don't know if you were here.
Yeah, I was here. Oh,
Oh,
good job.
anything I missed? I didn't. I would have had you chime in if I saw you there.
Well, I'm glad you did it because I wanted to, hear back how it's been, how the documentation goes and what people are thinking. And you covered pretty much all the high points. Good
Okay,
job.
cool. Very cool. Yeah, thanks for all your work on that, Jeremy. I know you've been putting in a lot of time on that.
You're welcome.
Okay, and I think I'm down to one of my last announcements. Yeah, this one here. This was maybe the more interesting thing that happened this past week. I first saw it on LinkedIn, and now I think it's on Hacker News today. So MasterCard had their root name servers misconfigured. They had a typo, could happen to anyone. You see, they're using apparently Akamai, and the name servers for that should be under the acam.net domain, and they had dropped the T on one of these, probably a copy pasta mistake. Not unsimilar or dissimilar to like some of the other types of DNS things that have come up over the years. The one that comes to mind is the bit flipping phenomenon that happens where researchers discovered that just because there's so many devices out there and some of them do not have error correcting memory, that just based on what is it, what are the particles that pass through Earth from the sun can flip bits on memory, causing very subtle little changes in characters, and then that results in computers using wrong name servers as one of the example. So they identified some of the common bit flip domains and registered them, and sure enough, they got traffic, legitimate traffic coming through to them. Well, these researchers discovered this. They were able to register acam.ne. NE is the top level domain for one of for Niger, and sure enough, they started getting DNS traffic for MasterCard and many other organizations, because it turns out they were not the only one to bungle that domain. So what does that mean? Well, if you control the name server or one of these for some percentage of traffic, you can return whatever IP address you want for those DNS lookups. And it is a, it is a scammer's dream to have that opportunity. Fortunately, these were friendly security researchers, but it just highlights the risks. Any interesting observations related to this or other points?
Yeah, my first observation is how the heck does Akamai not have that registered?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Defensive DNS registration, if you will. But there's so many possibilities, right? But that's a pretty easy one to protect against.
Yeah, I would also assume that Akamai can afford to register many of the possible typos to protect themselves from these kind of things, especially since they're a content management network that is specifically like helping you to protect against these kinds of things. So that actually really surprises me.
Has anyone checked the Route 53 domains? The .ne available? That'd be interesting. All right. Well, that's all I got. Let's check the chat, see what's there.
So actually, if they had DNSSEC, they shouldn't have been vulnerable, though, right? Assuming that the resolvers that they're using have DNSSEC enabled.
Assuming all the clients, you mean that
The clients are the resolvers, right? Because the resolver, I think, would
no. So someone's looking at MasterCard something.mastercard.com. It goes to the root name servers and says which DNS server is authoritative over MasterCard.com, and it then gets back this .ne thing, and it forwards your DNS request to this acam.ne thing, and that server can return whatever it wants.
But
Right, so
that is true, but the DNSSEC, some signature or whatever, I forget what it is, don't you get that from the registrar?
yeah, but I'm saying only if your end client supports
Right, yeah.
that. Yeah, that's all I was saying.
Okay, got it.
So yeah, if your client was following best practices and using DNSSEC, then this should have just resulted in some error, and maybe it just retries and hits another server, and that's maybe why it went
Yeah.
unnoticed for so long.
But I would bet that, as an example, in credit card terminals that are sitting, that are 15 years old, that are sitting in a bunch of places around the world, they do not have DNSSEC compliant DNS stacks running on them, as an example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware the client can implement it, but I also thought the resolvers implemented it where your Google 8.8.8 or 1.1.1 from Cloudflare would do the DNS sec validation for you as a resolver. So even if the client, even if your laptop may not do its own checks, I was thinking the resolver itself does that check. If you're using a popular resolver, I'm not sure what they use on those credit card terminals.
Seems reasonable. Not sure.
Well, technically,
pretty sure that DNSSEC, all the information comes from the DNS server.
Right.
So if you've hijacked the domain name, you're running your own DNS server, you can implement DNSSEC to prove that it's coming from this server and hasn't been tampered with. And I don't know, that's all DNSSEC is going to get you. It's not going to get you that this record matches the other server's records.
I don't think that was the point though, right? It
was
was
the point is if you have the .ne server, you can make those whatever domain name lookups resolve to whatever IP address you want, which would include your compromised server.
But I
It would
thought
also allow you to get TLS certificates for it.
Yes, but
part of that's true, but I thought that there's some key material you get from the registrar to set up DNSSEC on your DNS server. So even if you control that domain, you won't be able to produce that thing, and I'm not technical to say what that thing is.
I'm pretty sure that that's not the case. And it doesn't come from the registrar, it comes from the DNS server in the form of additional records.
Yeah, my understanding is with yours, Eric, is you have these DS records that you register in your registrar. You do it manually in most cases, and then on the hosted zone, you have some other component of that. I'm assuming the private key is somehow used on the DNS hosted zone, like in Route 53, and then and then some signature. I think it's served up with each record, but I'm not sure.
I just remember having to log in. We had to set something up for HubSpot, or like last year there was some big thing that happened and you had to enable DNSSEC, or emails were going to start bouncing. And I don't remember the details. I just remember I had to copy something from Google where our domains were registered at the time, but I don't remember more than that.
Yeah, I've set up before. It's pretty much copy paste and forget about it. As long as you're not managing the keys yourself. And with Route 53, that was the case.
Yeah. Huh. All right. Well, we'll find out more. Cool. Anything else this week that was interesting?
I saw one thing. Oops, I just lost the Zoom window. Oh, there we go. I saw an interesting white paper that came out. Well, it came out last year. I saw it this week. So one of those things. But I just posted a link in the group chat. But it talks all about the biases of. Oops, what happened?
I had a missing F.
Oh, okay. I thought I did something. It talks about the biases of code reviews. And it talks about like this experiment they ran at Google, essentially, where they the authors and reviewers were anonymized in their code review process to eliminate biases, and it was pretty interesting. Although they basically kind of concluded that a couple of things is that it definitely got rid of biases, but a lot of times people were still able to guess who was reviewing their code based on like language style and the communication and all of those kinds of things. And then second, they said that it hindered the review process because communication about the pull requests had to go through this anonymization process too. So they could no longer just like poke a head over a cubicle and ask people questions or ping someone on instant messenger or whatever. They had to go through some other way to communicate on it. But it was an interesting read if anyone wanted to take a read of it.
Interesting. Duffy was posting in the chat here that maybe we were thinking of DKIM and DMARC, especially since I mentioned having to do something at the beginning of last year, and that would coincide with that. So maybe that's what the confusion was there. And then you're right, Jeremy.
I don't know. I'm looking, it says that you do have to do something with the registrar, but it doesn't say what I'm looking at. So I don't know if you could copy it, or not. I mean, the thing is that they presumably have set up the keys already. So I think you could copy it from the legitimate domain. But I don't know either. I could be wrong.
Right. I don't know that there's anything private. Everything is public that we copied. Yeah. Right. Did we announce Atmos stores, Matt? I don't remember if we did or not.
I was actually sick last week, so I don't know. I wasn't on the call.
I don't think so. Yeah. So there is one exciting announcement we'd like to bring up related to Atmos. So when you break your architecture,
setup project.
Yeah. So when you break your architecture out into various components, it does many things for you, right? It helps you manage components independently by lifecycle. And since things are broken out by lifecycle, you probably reduce the blast radius of your changes. Things are faster because there's less infrastructure under management. It's easier to set up the controls around who can change what. So a lot of good things happen. And some trade-offs. You want to get maybe the VPC ID of the VPC that was deployed as part of one lifecycle, so that you can launch your cluster, which is a different piece of infrastructure, not coupled to the lifecycle of your VPC. How do you get that VPC ID? Or in this case, how do you get the load balancer ID so you can pass it to your ingress controller or something like that if you're provisioning that separately? So this is where it comes down to you want to be able to share data between your components. And we've supported many ways of doing this in Atmos. If you've been following along, the first thing that we supported was using this template notation. We learned a lot from that. You could almost consider that an experiment. And there were a lot of performance issues related to that and some encoding issues because we're just using YAML as templating. So from there, we moved on and we implemented another function called bang terraform.output, which ironically is not in this document, but it should be. And well, that's not the highlight of this conversation. But the highlight of this conversation is we've introduced a new function called store. And a lot of thought and time has gone into implementing this and making this future-proof. So let me introduce what we're trying to do here and what were some of the lessons learned from working with Terraform outputs and the previous iterations that we had. So working with Terraform outputs was very convenient because we didn't have to come up with another data store, another data model. We could just initialize any component, aka root module, and fetch the outputs. But it's very slow to go through all of that. And we could just read from some backends directly, but if we want a general solution, we couldn't do that easily. So since there's so many backends that people use for Terraform, there's GitLab, there's S3, which we use. Others use blob storage in Azure. Some use something similar on Terraform on GCP. Others use Terraform Cloud. Those are all pretty mainstream solutions, nothing esoteric there. So something that worked directly with those backends wasn't something that seemed very feasible for us as an implementation to speed things up. So it was just very slow trying to get Terraform outputs, and it's something yet we really needed when we try and compose an infrastructure with multiple pieces that could be created by other teams or by other components in your infrastructure.
Or
So-
not by Terraform.
Yeah, maybe not even by Terraform. Maybe some platform teams using CloudFormation or CDK or otherwise. So this data exists somewhere, and you need to retrieve it, and you need to retrieve it in an efficient manner. There's another problem we ran into with Terraform, reading Terraform state, is that the outputs could be, for example, in a different account or have different permissions boundaries that made it difficult to retrieve them. So if we just relied on Terraform state and Terraform outputs, it means to retrieve the output of any other thing, you need to have at least access to read the complete state of that other thing, which is often not a requirement. So the solution that we came up with was, let's create a pluggable way of defining backends for storage to store this kind of metadata. And we started with implementing it with SSM. So for Amazon, we've implemented it for Artifactory, which was an enterprise requirement we had to fulfill. Somebody has already opened up a pull request. Thank you, Pepe, adding Azure support, Azure Key Vault support. And the idea is that this is going to extend and extend and extend. And any number of these stores can now be used to retrieve values that you can use to power your infrastructure with Atmos. So this allows teams to own the outputs that they are responsible for. For example, if you're thinking about an enterprise, there might be a network team managing just the network infrastructure, and they can put outputs of network addresses, whitelists, CIDRs, etc., in a well-known location that we can retrieve within Atmos. And the same thing can happen with other pieces. Or in the simple case, you're just building up an infrastructure, it's decoupled, you want to get the VPC ID, you can now get that very easily and very quickly using the store functionality. Here's what it looks like in an Atmos configuration. This is a stack configuration. We're defining a cluster. The cluster wants to get deployed somewhere in a VPC. I need the VPC ID, so I'd be able to express it like this. So retrieve the VPC ID from the VPC component from the SSM in production, calling the store method here, the store function. And this is using explicit tags, which is a way you can extend YAML in a compliant way without templating. And yeah, that's it in a nutshell. You can configure any of these stores. Matt, you were gonna say
I was just going to say, if you wanted to just quickly show setup project under there,
Yeah.
you can show how the stores are configured in Atmos.yaml.
Yeah. So here you can see we're setting up a number of stores. Here's a store for Artifactory in dev, another store for Artifactory in production. This is also leveraging another nice explicit tag we just introduced for env. So you can inject the environment variable then here from your runtime and post it here. Now, anytime you use bang store for prod artifactory, it's going to hit this location and retrieve the secret, or sorry, not the secrets, the values that you want from there. We are going to follow this up with a separate implementation for secrets handling. It's going to piggyback on a lot of the same functionality you see here and do a nice job for secrets. Let's see in chat. Yeah, Dan was just sharing. Dan, can you help me remember that we should update that page for sharing data to just mention the Terraform output? So this was the alternative mechanism. This is sufficient if you have smaller stacks. You don't have the permissions boundaries that were problematic. You don't want to maintain. You don't want to put this anywhere else. Then Terraform output is a fine way of doing it. It's just that it's going to be slow if the size of your component, your stack configuration gets large. Oh yeah, something I'm really excited about, which we also just released for Atmos, another template function. So we added a template function for pound include, and seems pretty obvious, but we didn't really think about it until recently, and it's really nice. So here's a typical stack configuration that you might have, and you'll have some variables. And now this is a little bit of a contrived example. This was literally copied out of the automated tests, and we should make a better example here. But this is showing you all the different ways you can invoke it for different purposes. One of the problems that we've seen with stack configurations is, well, Terraform inputs have gotten a lot more elaborate as some modules are moving to accepting inputs that are objects with multiple types of properties and multiple levels of nesting. Let's say you're defining a monitoring rule for Datadog or Grafana Cloud. You can get like 4 or 5 levels deep of nesting and a really complex parameter, and just putting all of that in a configuration can be overwhelming. So now you can move, for example, just the inputs for some part to a file and include it. But not only that, you can also reference any part of that file you're importing and inject that. So that allows you to use like JQ-like syntax or YQ-like syntax to extract some path out of that file. We also support TF-vars format. So this is really interesting because you can very quickly now import a component like an existing Terraform root module and work with stacks. And you don't even need to copy and paste the values into Atmos. You can literally just say, you can just have vars, and then you can do something like this, include, and then the path to your file, and it'll inject the contents there into the Atmos stack configuration. So if you prefer to continue managing Terraform var files, you can, or if you want to move it all into native YAML, you can. You can still leverage all the inheritance that comes out with Atmos out of the box, and other goodness. I think that's all the announcements then. Let's jump into Q&A. That's a weird one. we get a notification in our Zoom chat. By the way, our office hours is the best attended automated note-taking meeting, I think, out there. We probably get 14, 15 automated note takers joining every call. We just got a notification from somebody's note taker that they've reached the end of their recording limit. And it lets the whole group know that here. So I guess that's why there's so many of these AI recorders. They spread virally because they can just spam all the participants. All right, let's jump into Q&A then. Any questions we can get answered today? Venkat, I know you always have one waiting for me.
I guess I got two. So,
Oh, see?
all right. So when you're approving a PR, you have to approve the PR. So if you have like a pull request check and you want to merge a PR, like Dependabot PR, you have to approve it. At least that's the rule that we have. And then after you approve it, you have to go find the merge button. Has anyone here found a button where you could just approve and like merge, or like a macros? Or you
Well,
just do
there's
the one.
that's like enabling auto merge on when all the requirements are met. On a yeah, but I forget if there's a global setting for that, or if you can auto, and I don't know that you can enable it for like a class, if you will, of pull requests, or for a particular
I think I'm getting to the point where I would like to save myself the extra 2 seconds on that click. I'm fine with just,
yeah.
if I could do it across every repo, I'd probably just, yeah.
The issue there is that the merge is not just a simple button. You have to approve the title and comments of the merge. So the PR author can allow the auto merge, can set if the repository permits it, the PR author can set it to auto merge when required and fill in the title and comments then. And then it will automatically merge when you approve it. But that's up to the yeah, as Eric's showing, that's confirm auto merge. And now as soon as everything is
all these required
approved, everything passes, as soon as it can be merged, it'll be automatically merged. We also have Mergify set up in some of our repos, and not our Terraform repos, but some other places, where Mergify will automatically merge it once the requirements are met.
It'll do the commit message for you as well.
Yeah, it has some capability of creating the commit message.
You know, I think I looked at this a while ago. I think the thing that turned me off was just it's $14 a seat. So I assume I have to basically get it.
For closed source. For open source, it's free. But yeah.
Oh, okay,
just
got
become
it.
open source. No.
If you look at our packages repo, you'll see that we use it heavily there to automatically update our packages.
And what's also cool, like since you brought up Dependabot, you can create a bypass list together with something like Mergify that allows it to bypass some of your protections.
Got it. Maybe that'd be a simpler solution. Just add in that something on the bypass list. It appreciate the tips. Also appreciate you bringing up Mergify, because I looked at that before for this, but I haven't kicked the tires on it. So cool to hear that it seems to work. And then I'll have to see if it just works on public repos for free, or if we've got to pay 14 a seat. And I'm sure there's more to it that justifies the pricing.
We're not paying for it, so it works for us right now. But,
oh, cool. You didn't have to do an application or anything to get approved?
No, well, for free, no, it's just automatic for public repos that
Oh,
there's nothing, there's no hurdles. But the biggest wart is that there are two ways to configure Mergify with your repositories. One is automatically attached to all repositories, including, and you don't have a way to say except for private, so it will attach itself to every repository, including your private ones, and then you'll always have a red X on your private ones because there's no, you don't have a paid seat. So that's the annoying thing. And then the alternative is you have to manually select the repos you want to add Mergify to, and then you can manually select your public repos. But then new repos you create won't be automatically added to the list. So that's the conundrum.
Do you folks have both public and private mixed in your orgs, or do you guys do one public org and then one private?
We do, I mean, just because, you know, we've had Cloud Posse for a long time.
Yeah.
So now we have separate orgs. We're moving more and more private things too. But yeah. And then,
Yeah, I'm wondering if that makes it a little easier. We're obviously much younger than you guys are. So I think I'm wondering with the separate org, if I could just say, go ahead and just access everything. Like, because we just have a fully public org and then we have a bunch of orgs.
No, I think that would work. If you have that division between orgs, that should just work fine for you.
Yeah, I'll send you a DM if I want to get that set up, let you know, see if it's worth the time for you folks to make a switch. Cool. And then the other question I had was, I noticed in the Cloud Posse docs, I had heard about this before, I think through an Amazon blog post. It's called ADRs.
Yeah.
And I noticed you folks are doing them as well, or like had a mention of it in your docs. I was curious to know how that's actually working in practice. So for some more context, we're a pretty small team, and some decisions were made. Whether they're good or bad is kind of irrelevant. We're kind of pretty deep in on these decisions at this point. And so, and I'm sure the same thing has happened to many small teams or orgs. And so just curious on how you folks adopted ADRs, and did you guys retroactively create them for like established patterns? Like what was like the, if you have any insights on that.
I mean, with all these kinds of processes, I think it's hard to argue that if they took zero effort, is there any debate you should have ADRs, right? Definitely want ADRs, right? Now it's a question of, well, how much effort? Well, in an ideal world, you'd go back and document every decision, but we don't live in that world, and no one has enough time to go and do that. So the other challenge is the more rigorous you make it, the more, you know, thorough they get, the longer they take to write. All that said, absolutely, we still practice it. Never as much as I wish as we should. Maybe there's still things that happen that aren't documented, but especially in our case, working with customers, it's so important, especially for higher touch engagements, to have ADRs, because, you know, at the time there's so many competing factors of why a decision is made, and it's not necessarily purely technical. It is, you know, based on who on the team is available to implement it. It's on, you know, time constraints, technical constraints, what we know. So as much of that you can capture will really help understand how you arrived at the solution. We're going through this in one project where it wasn't done now. And it's kind of, everyone's kind of, well, I thought it was your requirement. No, I thought it was your requirement. And that would be addressed with one of these. And then we could more quickly talk to the people who had spoken up about these requirements and make sure they're still requirements, or if there was a misunderstanding about those. So, yeah. I wouldn't get caught up so much on the format, and there's like some adrtool.org I think we started with, and that has been abandoned, I think.
I think I did come across a GitHub project. I was a little confused on if it was worth the investment, because it looked like I could just do this in Markdown or even a Google Doc to start off with.
Oh yeah, and that's what you can do. I guess what I can share are a couple of the nice to haves along the way to consider. So like this was the project we started with. As you can see, it is now thoroughly abandoned. I think when we first started using it, it was maybe 2 years abandoned or something. We just didn't know that was it.
Yeah.
Considered feature complete. But it's just a simple Go utility and binary you can run. And what it helps you do is manage an index of your design decisions in order and come up with the reference for that ADR. One of the challenges that we've had is when you don't have sufficient tooling. On the one hand, I think it's really nice to have a sequential list of ADRs, ADR1, ADR2, ADR3, if you will. And then what's cool is you can very easily reference those ADRs in your documentation, in your code, in pull requests, etc. But managing those sequences of auto-incrementing IDs is the real big pain in the butt, because you'll often have multiple PRs open at the same time to add ADRs, assuming you're going to commit those to code. And then you spend a lot of time having to deal with just conflicts of file names and things like that. So thoughts have been said, well, let's just make it, date-based, and then you suddenly have a really long, 10-digit codes that you got to reference, which I like saying ADR 123 more than I like saying 2025 09 11 01, because you could have multiple decisions on the same day, right? So you got to add some other thing on there. So I don't know if any of this resonates with you or
I actually wasn't even thinking about the naming. So I was just thinking about the content, but that's a really good point. Obviously you're gonna want to reference it.
Let me chime in with regards to the content. I love documentation. I'm less of a fan of it than Eric is. And so to me, the ADRs are most important when in covering a source of truth for information that people are going to need to want to know, like what sitter ranges are we using for our VPNs? Somebody wants to know that, they need to look it up somewhere. That should be in an ADR, even though it's not technically a design decision by some people's standards, but it's reference information that that people need. And then the other question is, as happens with technology changes, new people come on board, they have a better idea. Why are we doing it this way? Can't we change it to this new way? And the ADR needs to explain why we're doing it this way in anticipation of why we're not doing it the other way and what would it take to change it to the other way. And those are the ADRs, those are the only ADRs I ever look at or consider helpful. I mean, others like, what kind of abbreviations are we going to use? Those are important, but they're totally preferences and super hard to change. So, you're just stuck with it. And an ADR explaining what we're doing is fine, but nobody's going to change it.
Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, the thing that I also find useful is a lot of times just the why. Sometimes I get frustrated with the things things the way they are, and then if I read the thought process of how someone arrived at that, it makes more sense to me, and I'm usually less frustrated if it's well thought out. Like, oh, okay, I understand at least why at that point in time with the information that they had, this is the decision that was come to, versus just like, I don't know, that was decided before my time, I just have to live with it. Those kinds of things. It seems much more helpful to be able to read that kind of background info as well.
Yeah, going back to Jeremy, your cider example, I've usually just thrown that in on like a wiki page, but I never really thought about using something like an ADR for it. So would you basically, is your view on it just using ADR as essentially your docs in general, or do you still have, I guess?
No, we
Which should be-
would still put the sitter blocks in the VPC component README that, you know,
Yeah.
or something with a VPN component, but it can be, it's nice to have it all in one place as an ADR. And usually what comes up in the ADR description, addressing Matt's point, is like, why are we using 168 instead of 1? Right? Or
Okay.
what ranges are, you know, how big a sitter are we allocating and why is it that big? And, you know, other background information like that, which helps people understand how to create a new VPN sitter.
Got it. Cool.
And you bring up those, like, this is the constant problem with documentation as a overall thing. It's an information architecture, and depending on how you're going about it, you want to have that information in different ways. When you're getting up to speed on something, it can be helpful to understand the linear trajectory of a project by looking at the design decisions that were made along the way, and you can start to empathize with why the project, to Matt's point, is the way it is, because you know, the problems you're faced come up as you go. When you look at documentation, otherwise, from a different lens, it's not a timeline of decisions that were made. It is the snapshot of the current system as a whole, and where do you dig in to this whole system? There are different approaches. Well, we're going to start chapter by chapter, or we're going to look at what were the most recent changes to the documentation and focus there. So you're going to have some plan of attack to break that down. And if you have ADRs, that's just another way of viewing it. And maybe it has a subset of the information. Maybe that information is ultimately repurposed and becomes the basis of other documentation. But, you know, we all know documentation is a chore to write and gets out of date, and finding the right way to organize it is difficult.
Got it. Appreciate the insights.
Sorry, let me just add one more thing, and then I'll let you say what you're going to say. So the one other thing I would say is that when you've thought about a problem domain like really in depth, and you document it, it leads to people like not just doing the but it's just ... argument, which happens a lot. So like this VPC one is a good example. So that's up on the screen. Like, okay, well, we just need to set some IP address blocks for our VPC. So if you go back to what you just had, the summary portion of it, I just wanted to show you that you had like, oh, I was just going to show that there were like nine or 10. Yeah, there you go. So like, so VPR, so we're going to do CIDR blocks, how the CIDRs are allocated for client VPNs, for host name formats, how we're going to do TLS, are we going to enable IP v4 and v6? Like, these are all things that we've thought about as a team, we've discussed and we've documented. Like, this isn't just, let me click the interface and go like new VPC or just like slap something on it. Like there's all reasons behind why we did all these things. And at least then if someone wants to do it differently, they at least can go, okay, well, if I'm going to do it differently, I better read this to understand why things are the way they are, so that I can then make a more informed decision about what I'm going to do for the next iteration of this, you know, that kind of thing. So that's all I was going to say. It's just, you don't realize how complex problems are until you break them down and solve all the pieces and write it down. So, yeah.
Cool.
We consistently get that as the feedback. This is what people really appreciate the most with our reference architecture, is that we lay it all out, like all these things that it's not just, no, it's, you have to think somebody has to make these decisions along the way. And I guess if you go from that vector, that you're going from the decision, then I think documenting the outcome of that decision makes a lot of sense. If you think about normal documentation, it's written in retrospect and has the privilege of knowing what the outcome was and documenting that, as opposed to the process along the way.
So last question, follow-up question I have on this is you have these ADRs, you have these docs. Have anyone on this call found a good tool to basically chat with it, like an LLM type of solution where you could just ask it questions on basically all the things we're talking about, but just kind of how the LLM parses your data? I'm ignoring.
Yeah, Notion has AI available as an add-on, and it will ingest, like, if you have this in a GitHub, it'll ingest your GitHub repo and allow you to query it. It also lets you ingest the content that you put into Notion as well, and other things. And I found it uses Claude under the hood, and I found it to be quite good in many respects.
Cool. Appreciate the tip. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up Notion. That's a good point. That's a great application of that. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our hour. We'll be posting a recording of this office hour session to our YouTube channel. So go to youtube.com/cloudposse, where you'll find the latest recording and our back catalog for the last 5 years of all the other episodes. If you're curious about how Cloud Posse can help move your organization further along, especially with infrastructure as code, go to cloudposse.com/meet, and you'll book a meeting with me directly. Here's some other follow-up items. If you're interested to get more involved with what we're up to at Cloud Posse, we have our Slack community at slack.cloudposse.com. We syndicate our office hours as a podcast as well, so you can listen to the past recordings as audio at podcast.cloudposse.com. And yeah, if you haven't yet signed up for our live office hours, you can do that by going to cloudposse.com/office hours. Again, cloudposse.com/office hours. With that said, thanks everyone. Had a great time today, and we'll see you back next week at the same time, same place. Bye.